be that loud. Hello? Okay. I'm Jenny Chu. I work for CBS Sports, and I'm honored to be on with you guys on this panel. We're going to go ahead and go through introductions first. Dee Kundra, FC Bayern Munich, Managing Director of the Americas. Laura Krug, Kansas City Chiefs, Chief Media and Marketing Officer. And Ron Goldberg over there with the black and white photo from his wedding is with the Brooklyn Nets. And he's the VP of International Marketing and Innovation. So all of you guys work for growing global brands in different sports, but let's talk through your pathways to get to where you are. We'll start with you.
Sure, absolutely. So I decided as I was growing up that I wanted to work in fashion. So I studied fashion, I did my degree in fashion, did lots of work experience and realized I hated it. That industry was not for me at all. So then I actually went into music PR in the UK, working on all the big music events there. That included Fashion Rocks and Party in the Park. And then I joined the Prince's Trust, which was a charity. And basically, they did all the big music events, so I was there to do the PR. And then they said, actually, we're a charity, it's too high risk, so we're actually going to stop doing these music events. So I was like, well, what am I going to do? And then they were like, oh, you can work on our sports initiatives, which were cricket, rugby, and football at the time. And I grew up in the UK, but, you know, Formula One was in my household. So I was like, okay, let's give this a try, and I absolutely loved it. I fell in love with sports. I fell in love with the team camaraderie, you know, just the passion that's around it, the community, etc. And then I've been in there ever since. I looked after Barclays sponsorship for the Premier League. I moved to Liverpool to join Liverpool Football Club. Then I moved to New York to work with the New York Cosmos. And then I joined Bayern 8 years ago.
Oh my gosh, 8 years ago. I don't think I realized it was that long. Not the same, but I guess similar in the sense of I did not start out with a plan to get into sport, but started my career actually at a media agency, so was always very much kind of obsessed with the idea of, you know, fans and consumers and media and where they spend their time and attention. Moved over to beauty from there, so I was at Avon on their e-commerce business, and then I joined L'Oreal at that point on the global side of their business in hair care, so again, nothing to do with sport or even remotely close to sport, but certainly got kind of the bug to focus more on international marketing, global fandom, global consumers at the time. And then after a few years there was brought over to Anheuser-Busch InBev, which is really, I would say, probably the closest that I got to sport at that point. We actually worked together many years ago, and was on their global side of their business for many years in media, digital, took over their sponsorship and experiential business, and then moved to the US side, where worked on a variety of brands in terms of leading marketing, but left with Stella Artois, which was kind of my baby for many years in the US and is still kind of beloved in many ways to me. At that point, my family and I decided to move to Kansas City, really for my husband's job, but with COVID, I was still with Anheuser-Busch, and was reached out to by the Kansas City Chiefs for their first ever CMO role, which was an absolute honor and pleasure, and you can imagine 3.5 years in has been wonderful. So did not plan to be in sport, love sport, but in many ways, I think I've always kind of been obsessed with media and consumers and how content gets to them and those experiences. So all kind of played into place.
You brought the winning streak to the Chiefs.
Yeah, exactly. Beauty to beer, I think, as they say.
Sure. I started my career on the international sports side. I joined the NBA's Canadian office in Toronto back in 2013, and I started on the corporate partnership sales side. It was an amazing time to work for the league in Canada. It was called the Golden Era, a record number of talent in the league, first overall picks, the first international All-Star game in 2016, and then the first championship north of the border in 2019 when the Raps won. And it was an amazing experience because the NBA has, I think today they have 14 international offices. At the time they had 12. But we were the only international office with a team in our market with the Toronto Raptors. So it was almost like this incredible master's class in league and team dynamics, which has served me really, really well in my current role. I transitioned from corporate partnership sales to eventually leading marketing for the NBA in Canada. It was during an amazing time from 2019 to 21, Raps Championship, pandemic, really sort of like unique challenges and opportunities. And then in 21, I moved to Brooklyn to create an internal insight, strategy, and creative agency that was really focused on commercializing the brand. And really early on, when we were digging through insights, we were all really surprised by how big the Nets global fan base was. So 18 or 19 months into that role, I went to my boss and the CEO and pitched them on this new department, international marketing and innovation. And we're very new, we're very young, we're 20 months into this thing, but it's been incredibly fulfilling and really challenging and really exciting.
Well, Ron, that kind of leads me to you guys understanding the need for it, right, within your own franchise. But then how do you determine the direction? Because you're saying it's young. How do you decide, okay, this is what we need to hit first. This is the place we need to do it, how to do it?
Yeah, we spent the first 90 days building strategy. We actually, I think, scheduled something like 35 interview calls with brands we loved. One of those calls was actually with Lara, so full circle moment. But we spent a lot of time like really trying to understand what the opportunity was. We listened a lot, we learned a lot, and then we built strategy. And we took that strategy to anyone who would listen. We took it to the executive level, from the executive level all the way down to the most junior levels of the company, and we wanted people's input. We got buy-in, we got feedback, we got knowledge, and we took that knowledge, packaged it up, and started executing against it. And we got wins along the way, a lot of small wins along the way that added up into bigger wins, and we're leveraging that momentum moving forward.
Laura, I see you nodding your head because you probably have a similar story.
Yeah, I'm smiling, one from that phone call and two from similar experience. I think a lot of, and I guess full circle moment, we worked with Dee from the beginning and our relationship with FC Bayern to understand what worked for them and moving from Germany to global and certainly from the US. But yeah, there were a lot of small wins along the way, which I feel like were a really big part of it. The league on our side is slightly different in the sense that it was an NFL international rights program, right? It was an evolution to how NFL had been playing in the international space up until 21, where the league was playing games. They're really driving that through kind of the shield and through games. And then it shifted where clubs had the opportunity to raise their hands and build business plans on a variety of markets that they believed in, invested in. The fan growth was there. And so, yeah, we've a similar journey now in terms of 3 years. We were able to play a game in Germany last year, which is one of our markets. But the strategy was so important, and I think really then being flexible as we've gone, because you only know what you know, right? You can see the data, you can have these relationships, but until you get into the markets, not only with the fans, but also, you know, what properties make sense in terms of the market, right? What are the ideals of the Chiefs or the Americana of our brand that work really well in Germany versus Mexico? The reliance of, you know, we don't have a game every week. As much as I would love to do that, I don't think Coach Reed would love me for that. So really being quite innovative and creative in terms of the products, the content, media, and our channels. So I'm nodding because the small wins, we use the baseball metaphor actually of like, we need a couple singles, and then when you have a big home run, it really does make a big impact.
And I'll just add, like, we all have seen the stats on the slides, right? The millions of fans globally, the engagement metrics on social, but to your point, like, until you do it and you build it and you see it, the momentum that you can build from a successful execution can like lead you for years.
Yep.
And we took a lot of what we saw from what you guys did and what the Chiefs did and riffed on it and turned it into what we ended up building in some markets. So it's also really helpful to see other brands, especially in our space, do it and execute it and do it really, really well, because it sets the next benchmark.
Yeah. Dee, how did Bayern Munich in the opposite direction, right? They realized that from Germany, even though that soccer is the biggest thing or football is the biggest thing, we need to have the Americas office as well.
Yeah, so Bayern opened its office in 2014, so 10 years ago now, and the club had great foresight to come into this market early, and the potential is what kind of drew us here. We knew the numbers, we knew kind of what fan base we had here, and it was all about growing it. And I think, you know, people always kind of ask early on, less so now because I think everyone is moving in this direction. It's not so niche anymore. But early on, people would be like, why is a German soccer team setting up in the US? Like, what's the vision? And it was like, you know, at that time, the stats were, you know, there's almost 100 million people interested in football. That's bigger than the population of Germany. Why wouldn't we try to get a piece of the pie? So we've been here 10 years. It's been a lot of learnings. It's been a lot of small wins. And it's a long-term play, right? And that's where I go back to the great foresight of the club. It doesn't just happen overnight. It really is kind of these small wins that build up over time. And Ron, you said about learning and being humble. We are one of the biggest teams in Europe. But here, we have to listen, we have to learn, we have to understand the culture.
When you talk about being, you know, a first mover in the space, you talk about Bayern having their offices 10 years ago, and then you have your friends here coming to, now friends, coming to you for advice because you guys had done it in the opposite direction. What is it like being one of those first movers?
It's great, and I think we're building this incredible community, and this panel was really important to us because, you know, it's all connected. We didn't just want to make it about soccer. We have lots of friends within the industry here. Dortmund are here, who we work with very closely, La Liga, etc. But we wanted to show how even across sports, across entertainment, it's really important to have these connections and, you know, learn from each other and grow together. There's enough of the pie for everybody, so it's just about how we can help each other and move it forward.
Amen to that one, Dee. Amen. Ron, what about you guys? Because you said you convinced them to open, you know, that particular partnership. Like, is there other NBA teams that are following suit after you've done that?
I think so, maybe in different ways. I think, you know, to answer the question around being a first mover, although we didn't have this international department up until 20 months ago, the Nets always raise their hand to play in global games. And that's an NBA-owned platform where they take the core product, live NBA basketball, and bring it to other markets globally. And I think that's a big reason why we have this massive global audience. We know that the live game grows fandom and is a key pillar of driving fandom. So we played in the first global game ever, 1984. We've played in a record 23 since, and it continues to be a big driver for us and a huge competitive advantage for us globally.
Laura, what about the NFL? Because that's something that we've seen the games in Europe, and they're growing and growing. How do you guys get there?
Yeah, I mean, just to go with the theme and the message, I think the first mover conversation is super important. It was something that we said. I joined in July of 21, and the bids were due in September, and that was a big part of it, which was we need to get ahead, because when you think about, certainly in the markets that we were really interested in, we knew that there were going to be games certainly on the radar, but we also knew that so many of fans, for example, more in Mexico, but in Germany, we're still so new to what American football is, and certainly Kansas City. I'm sure there's many in this room who are like, where is Kansas City? It's literally in the dead set of the country. And so there was a real belief that we have a huge window of awareness. We have a huge window of consideration, right, to hopefully drive to conversion, and being first was going to be an advantage for us. I also think, similar to the Nets in that way, it was something that has been kind of core within our brand DNA from the beginning. Lamar Hunt, who was the founder of the Kansas City Chiefs, was the first one. I'm not sure he was actually raising his hand, raising something in meetings, saying that we want to play. So we had played games in Japan, the UK. We were actually had played a game when the Berlin Wall fell. So there is, I think, a real like DNA in a lot of these organizations that it doesn't just start from the team. It has to start from the top and from the bottom to really believe in it. Our dream is to have you know, as many people, I think, as FC Bayern has really invested in it. It's become a corporate initiative of ours, right? It started with just about 4 of us really doing and still doing a majority of the day-to-day, but it has now become kind of this overarching theme. We talk about wanting to become the world's team, and having that big, bold ambition, I think, really helps in terms of that mentality that started with, we have to start somewhere and believe in the kind of long-term plan.
Well, one of the things is taking NFL to, you know, Europe, but then it's Kansas City specifically. How do I make you a Kansas City Chief fan as opposed to, I can't even name another football team. You guys know I work in this one.
we'll name someone, I don't know, someone else. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's where showing up was a big part of it. I think what we learned, I'll never forget, we spent about 7-8 days together with the FC Bayern team in Germany, really understanding all parts of their business on how they had grown internationally. And what we found was, like, and I used to say this idea of like being top of mind, the frequency of conversation. To Dee's point, the pie is big enough for all sports. I think it really comes down to what each of our brands or the sport deliver in terms of a proposition to a fan. American football is Americana commercialization, right, at its best. It's entertainment. And so we felt like that was a very different positioning than soccer, right, in Germany, or even basketball, which obviously is a huge presence there too. So it was really about making sure that our values of the brand came through, about family, about community, about Midwest humble. We talk about winning with character. Those types of values we felt like could resonate and could be the connection point to our fans internationally, even if they didn't fully know everything about us, and games were on at 2 a.m. or whatever it was.
Well, same for you. We have this same issue within football, right? That there's so many different leagues, there's so many different teams to support. How does FC Bayern try to come through as you want to be a fan of our team?
Yeah, and it's hard to get cut through, right? And it's a case of how are we making sure we're successful on the pitch? You know, we've had a really great run. It's been a great almost 125 years. So in that sense, it's great, but it's everything around that. And it was what you're saying, Lara. It's like people are more engaged with not just the product on the field. It's like, how do the jerseys look as lifestyle wear? It's like the gaming aspect of it. It's also a lot of people, they want to align with brands that match their own values. So then it comes to the dignity, the respect, winning with heart, everything else that comes with it. And that is kind of how we try and get cut through in the numerous different target groups that we have.
I would just add, like, I think, we talk about this a lot. This industry tends to rinse and repeat, like, we'll call it what it is. And I think the brands that win, the properties that win, are the ones that are going to think more like brands and less like properties, and truly understand that to be successful and to win, you have to be different. Like any other brand in any other category, being a sports team just isn't enough anymore. And like, all the credit in the world to both of you, because what you're bringing to market is different, and it's paving the path.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about success. Sorry, do you go ahead?
No, I was just saying, we were having this conversation earlier about it's really important to build on awareness and the brand and what we stand for, because in sports it's up and down, right? You're going to win some years, you're not going to win other years.
Winning is not a strategy, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then how do we stay relevant in the years that we're not winning? Which hopefully will be few and far between. But
Never, but.
So then, Dee, how do you measure success? When if it's not the winning aspect, how does the club win when you're talking about KPIs, ROIs, all of those things that people measure?
Yeah, and I think, the quick fix that everyone always says about internationalization is revenues. Of course it's revenues with everything, but what tools, what measures are we putting into place to get there? And it's awareness. How are we growing our reach? How are we making people aware of the brand? What's the brand affinity that we're building? We've seen success at Bayern. We started with 8 official fan clubs in 2014. We now have over 150 in North America. There's growth there, and they're our core brand ambassadors, but it's like, how are we getting in front of new eyeballs, bringing them into Bayern Munich and taking them through that fan funnel? And that's where a lot of the work that we do together comes into play. There's a big content play on everything that we do, because we want to get those Chiefs fans and those NFL fans, and we want those basketball Nets fans as well. So doing that kind of crossover has been really helpful.
Yeah, talk me through maybe a success story in this internationalization that works, because you guys are working together in a way that's so different, because you are soccer, you are football, your basketball. How does it kind of come together and then turn into a success story?
So I'll give one, doesn't necessarily touch on all 3 of us, but I think a good example, as Dee was saying, I think content for us has been so important. I think, to Ron's point, and we believe so wholeheartedly in this, is like we are a brand, and in that brand we have a lot of different products, one of which is the football game and the actual experience, and we do believe that that kind of drives the flywheel, right, of everything. We ultimately want all fans around the world to want to come to Kansas City and experience a game in person, but we are very clear that our stadium only fits 72,500 people, right? So unless we build 30 stadiums on top of each other, it'll be difficult to reach millions of fans consistently, which then goes into why not just being a brand, but thinking about other products that we have. So content, media, experiences, events, those become extensions of what we do. And one just quick example, actually, Mexico is one of our markets that we have marketing and commercial rights in. When we were about to present the bid actually internally, it was literally due the next morning. And we did have a real pause because we knew there was such potential in the audience size, right, the maturity of the market. But when you did the hard business plan of how are we going to prove revenue over time, it was difficult. Cowboys, Broncos, Steelers, you had a lot of clubs that had been investing in Mexico for a very long time and had shown up there consistently. It's a fragmented market. The commercial landscape's more difficult. So there were a lot of things that caused us pause, but the thing that we kept going back to was the audience is young. It's obviously accepting of American sport. There are the tactical time zone type of things that made sense, partners that can cross between Mexico and the US. But one of the things that we did this year, which was a little bit of a bet for us, is we actually created a 2-part miniseries called Viva Chiefs Kingdom, and it's about actually turning the mirror back to the fans. So we highlighted 12 Chiefs fans in Mexico for very little budget to create this production. We worked with our agency, Samba, who I don't know if they're in the room, but there he is, there he is. They brought us this idea, and we remember thinking internally, like, okay, that's interesting. For us to go out and create 2 pieces of really premium content, is it going to pay off? And it was a great example where we said, yes, we'll greenlight it, but we need to make sure we have a distribution partner to do it. That's opened doors with Fox Sports Mexico and many other media companies now. Now the league, we're talking to US media companies that want Spanish-speaking American content. Things that I think as a Kansas City brand, we're getting calls from, in the best way, from the Miami Dolphins being like, we don't create Spanish content. So I think there is this idea of finding and taking a bit of a risk, a calculated risk, right, on ideas that don't follow the same playbook. But that's a great example of one where that's the type of success we're trying to find, and have the playbook be flexible based on ultimately driving revenue and being successful with fans. But how you get there just has to look a bit different.
That flexibility is so important. I was on a panel yesterday with Peter Moore, who is CEO of Liverpool, and he talked about how 99% of fans are never going to be in the stadium to watch a match. So how do you engage them? How do you keep them happy? And content is a huge part of that. Yeah. Ron, do you have an example where some of that investment became a success story for you guys?
Yeah, I love the word you used, which was bet. So we had, we touched on like some of these small wins, but we also placed a really big bet around the global game we played in last year in Paris. It was a regular season game. It was the second time the NBA had gone back to Paris after a decades-long hiatus. And when we built this strategy early on, France actually rose up to the top of our priority market list. And so this was the first global game that we had with this new department, and we knew Paris was an important market, and there were all these things happening, these dynamics at play with Wembanyama getting drafted first overall, the Olympics coming to Paris at the end of the summer, and we just knew that we had a real big opportunity to do something that had never been done in that market before. So we built a 5-month-long campaign leading up to the game, largely driven by digital and social, but ultimately manifested in 5 different experiences, each rooted in a different pillar of culture. So we brought music to life through an orchestral tribute at one of the most iconic opera houses in Paris. It was an orchestral tribute to the Notorious B.I.G. Food, we brought to life a Brooklyn Nets branded pizzeria that was open for the entire week that the team was in market. Art, we partnered with Cause and built out an art exhibition. And the list goes on and on. Fashion, a merch drop, and then sport, like we played in the game, but we actually ended up running clinics for 1,000 youth while we were in market with our own Brooklyn-based clinicians and coaches and athletes. And so as we talk about measuring success, there's so many different ways. We sold out the concert, we generated 6 figures in revenue, and the billions of impressions and 500,000 people visiting the microsite. But I think what we were most excited about was that we saw this halo effect that we weren't expecting to see for like 2 or 3 years. But at the end of the season, what we saw was a 125% increase in ticket purchases from French consumers back in Brooklyn, which was our strategy on paper that we presented 12, 18 months earlier coming to life. And I would say just beyond all the metrics, we talked about this, but like being in market and seeing fans show up for our entire team, leadership, ownership, coordinator level, like to see that people really care about the brand and the energy that's being driven in some of these markets is maybe the most important success factor of all.
So Dee, how do you take the different regulations in all of these different places, including bringing German football into the United States, and maybe some challenges you guys have faced when you're making those cultural changes, lifestyle changes, all of those things, depending on the country?
Yeah, it is difficult. So we have an office in New York, but from New York, we service the whole of the Americas. And our focus markets are the US, Mexico, and Brazil. In the US, it's very much an educational play. We're teaching people, what the sport of football and why they should like it and why it's interesting, why it's a great sport to follow. In Latin America, it's more like football is everybody's first love, but they've already got their first teams that they've grown up with, their local teams. So how do we become their first team? How do we become their international team? And so those are very different challenges that we have, and it's about navigating that. And every market's different. We were talking about Mexico, and you were talking about the Cowboys, et cetera. Consistency is key, and being in the market.
Yeah, you said that from the beginning. So,
yeah, and that's what we found, that once we started entering Mexico, a lot of people were saying, yeah, clubs have been and they've left, like we don't really trust. So it's really been a consistent approach and presence in Mexico to make sure that we've earned that trust. And it's starting to pay off. We signed a partner just this summer. We've got a grassroots program there, so it really is important. Again, I go back to being humble and learning, and everything is based on the relationships and trust that you build.
Beautiful. Ron, what about you? What are some challenges you faced in that? Because when I think of football, a lot of the times, soccer, a lot of the times you can sign a Mexican player, and then all of a sudden you have a huge Mexican fan base now following that team through that player. I imagine that's not a luxury you have, because I can't name a Mexican basketball player.
Yeah, Mexico is not a priority market for us. There are 125 plus international players in the NBA, so it's certainly one strategy that's deployed by teams. I think there's, like Dee mentioned, like there's a plethora of challenges, right? Market to market, they're different. Time zones, local language, even, translating words that are used in basketball don't necessarily translate from market to market, so just being really authentic is really critical. But interestingly enough for us, the biggest challenge is actually the dynamic between team and league when it comes to international. Technically, teams do not have any marketing rights beyond their 150-mile territory. And so some of those rights get unlocked with partners, but a lot of the stuff that we did in the last 12 and 18 months did not have a partner attached to it, and it just required a tremendous amount of navigation with the league at a local level in New York, at an international level in Europe around the Paris stuff, and then almost across every single department. So it's time and trust and relationships and just being super transparent about what you're trying to achieve. At the end of the day, I think we all believe that a rising tide lifts all ships, right? But it takes time to prove that, and it takes time to build that trust, and I think we're slowly getting there.
Laura, how do you guys work together? Because, when you have international brands and you're kind of trying to do different things, you're trying to go to Germany, you're explaining how Dee helped you guys understand Germany and how that, I guess, market reacts to certain things. Give me examples of how you guys work together in that way.
So, I think that, one of the great examples for us, and I'll use Dee and what we've done there. So the relationship with FC Bayern and the Chiefs actually started in 2019. And so our ownership group also owns FC Dallas, obviously on the MLS side, and had been working more on the soccer-to-soccer side of things with player. And as we were looking at which markets we wanted to bid on, obviously Germany, for a variety of reasons, fan base, maturity game, rose to the top. But that relationship was a big one because, to what we're saying, you're entering any market where you're not, we are the big kid in Kansas City, but we are a tiny little child in Germany. And so that relationship was important, not just to learn from, but I also think when it comes to some of the creative executions, right? So we've brought alumni and have worked with FC Bayern players in terms of content and influencers. Flag football is a really big priority for the NFL, certainly for the Chiefs as well in terms of getting youth playing football and flag football. It's a great one where in the US and certainly in Kansas City, the way of activating youth programs is obviously very different than every other country, right? We work with the YMCA, we work with other clubs, they operate, they use our IP, right? We have boys and girls, thousands of boys and girls playing flag football. In Germany, obviously, youth becomes a big opportunity, but it's different. It's either through clubs or through schools. Schools don't really love when you commercialize their children in school, as neither do I. So you can't just simply copy and paste. And I think to Ron's point, like that's a very common thing within the league, which I think is great coming from beer. You don't talk to any other beer companies. You do not copy and paste. That's yours to own. So that was a great opportunity to learn from other sport, but you can't just simply take our US plans and assume it will work there. So that's a great one where when we did do our flag football camps, we actually worked with their team in Germany for space, for what was the right community to partner to work with. These seem like such tactical things, but when you don't have huge teams to do them, it's not like just pressing a button, it's the relationships. We started an advisory board in Germany, and a member of FC Bayern sat on our advisory board along with many others, a few others that literally we were meeting with monthly with our chairman and CEO and president, where we would present them with ideas of, hey, community is really important in Kansas City. It's a big part of what we do. What does that mean in Germany? So just a lot of that, to the point of being humble and listening and learning, was really important, I think, on accelerating our success so far.
And you talk about the things that like we often we don't think enough about, right? Logistics, the fine details. But if you're a brand, right, like the smallest details matter, right? Like how you show up for the consumer. It doesn't matter if they're 5 years old or 50 years old. Like they're looking for certain things, and I think it's just a great point. Like when you show up in a market, you have to show up the right way for that audience, no matter who they are.
Because you already have so many barriers, right? We're already asking, at least in Germany and Mexico, stop thinking about soccer for like 1 single second, or when you're done thinking about soccer, think about us. There's so many barriers that then when you do show up, if it's not in your best premium light, it is a tough ROI to make sense of, because you've kind of wasted your time and effort.
And if you're showing up the same way that another property showed up 3 months earlier or 2 months earlier, like you're losing.
Yeah.
In my opinion, you're losing.
Right. So when you talk about, being able to share like this, like beer companies, we don't talk to each other, right? You're different sports, so you are selling something a little bit different, but do you talk to maybe the Dortmunds of the world and kind of make sure that you collaborate there as well?
It may come as a shock to everyone, but we have a really great relationship with Dortmund. Mark, wherever you are, we get along really, really well. We talk all the time. We talk to La Liga. We talk to the Premier League. We all, and it is across sports as well, we all kind of have this vision that to get soccer to a certain level, we all have to work together, get the audience base there, get everyone engaged. And when it is one of the top sports here, we'll all break up and never speak to each other ever again. So that's the plan. But it is really important that we work together. We've just been in the market for so long and fortunate enough to have these relationships where we're able to just do things like this and work together. And, and it's vice versa with the Chiefs. When we called up and we were like, we have our Amazon documentary, what access can we get? We had the owner, we had Patrick Mahomes, we had Kelsey, so it is really a two-way street.
It might be seen as a little controversial, but like my team, we don't talk to any other NBA teams. We will talk to them if they reach out to us. And it's not that we don't want to be friends with anyone. It's more so we just don't want to be influenced. Even if it's in the back of our minds, we don't want to be influenced by what they've done or what they've said. We really want to lead. And so when we talk to other properties, we are talking to other brands, right? We are talking to other brands because we believe in their mission, we believe in their vision, we believe in what they're doing, as opposed to, yeah, they're in the sports space, so let's learn from them.
Yep.
That's really interesting. So when you're talking about your local sponsors, because local sponsors matter so much, you talk about the community being the center of teams and all of this, how do you sell them on the globalization aspect? Because you're saying, yeah, I care about you guys and that you come to the stadium and you support our team, but actually I'm going to go spend some money in Germany and Mexico. Like, how do you kind of make sure your local sponsors don't feel forgotten in those moments?
Yeah, I can give, so Kim Hobbs, who runs our partnership team, her and I, honestly, from day one, were kind of the two-man team leading this effort, at least in terms of that mentality of anything we do has to be both marketing and partner related. And I will say we actually now have 5 local partners in Germany, none of which are partners from the US. Not because we wouldn't love for our U.S. partners to, want to be partners with us in Germany, but I actually think it's showing a different light, which is we are able to find new brands in Germany that are seeing an opportunity with us, and a lot of them had not actually been sponsors within the sports space before, certainly not American football. What it's actually done is allowed for a really interesting combination with our then U.S. partners, right? So they're actually looking at some of the stuff that we do in Germany and vice versa now. I think a great example, which is obviously not within the U.S., but Engelbert Strauss is a partner of ours in Germany, who we were lucky enough to kind of get connected with. They are a sponsor of the NFL as well as Germany, and I'm sure some people saw them now as a sponsor with MLB during the postseason on the helmet. That's a great example for us where, to be honest, our wheels started turning to us to say, oh, maybe there are international partners that we're bringing on that also have really big brand and global ambition that may want to now consider us in the U.S. So we've been able to keep everyone happy, right? They're different types of deals or different types of products. But if anything, I think it's actually opened up everyone's minds of, okay, there are different ways to do this, and certainly an opportunity, hopefully, to have more global partners as we go.
Well, we see that throughout the different sports, different clubs, you have different approaches. It's like, yes, we collaborate with Dortmund, who people may not understand, and you're saying that, no, because we don't want to be influenced any sort of way. For me, as a broadcaster, one of the big things was I thought I needed to study every other broadcaster to be a top broadcaster, and someone told me, don't do that. You have your own style. Don't even watch the other ones. Be you. And I thought that really helped me because I have a very unique way of being myself. Do you think it's helped you guys to kind of not copy and paste the way other NBA teams have?
Yeah, I mean, we might be a basketball team, but we are a brand, and we mean so much more than 5 guys on a court. And they're amazing, and we love them, and what they do is incredible. But if we truly want to be a global brand, we have to transcend the court. There's no other option, and we're really lucky. We're really lucky that we represent Brooklyn, right? There's however many, I think 7, 8 pro sports teams in the New York market, maybe the most competitive market in the world when it comes to sports and entertainment, but we're the only team that has Brooklyn on our chest. And so for us, that's our differentiator. And Brooklyn has carved out almost every single lane of culture, right? Like, we talked about Biggie, Basquiat, Jay-Z, Jackie Robinson, like the list kind of goes on and on and on. And so for us, it's just an opportunity to tell those stories, to elevate Brooklyn, and to move the world forward through the borough that we represent.
That's beautiful. Okay, so lastly, before we get to questions, because there's a lot of people in the room and I feel like people want to ask questions, are there any other brands that you guys look to as inspiration to kind of get you guys going? I know you look to each other a lot, but are there any others?
I mean, there's loads, and I think the work that you guys have done has been great, but, just the interesting spaces, Washington Spirit just launched that capsule collection with Domo Wells, amazing, looked fantastic. roads that we need to look about going down. But obviously the championship that you guys had in Frankfurt, which was
Amazing.
awesome. And then the orchestra tribute to Notorious B.I.G. was just incredible. So that's for me, lots.
Yeah, I mean, these two, I think in the non-sports world, I think, and Ron and I were, you guys just you won an award for your Brooklyn and Paris, which is, or many awards, which is awesome. There are really interesting brands that are reverse coming into sport that I think we need to be very aware of and smart. What 7-Eleven did, I don't know if anyone saw it with Jamar Chase, and
Yes.
they totally infiltrated the field, and the sport was brilliant in my mind. So I do think also for our players, when I think about brands, like we are very, very lucky to have many faces of the NFL on our team, which we do not take for granted. The things that our guys are doing is impressive for us, and so we're looking to them as brands as well. I mean, what
Love
Patrick
that.
Mahomes does in terms of building his own brand is brilliant. So those are places that we certainly look to as well.
Yeah, I love the idea of looking at our athletes. I mean, they are truly the biggest influencers in the world. For us, Stussy, which some of you may be familiar with, they used to be a small skate surf brand out of California. They're a brand we talk to a lot and look up to. They have sort of revived themselves in the last 10 years and have expanded super aggressively internationally, including in Asia. So they've been a brand we're inspired by and talk to, and hopefully one day get an opportunity to work with. But the stuff you did around the championship, I think for us was groundbreaking, and we use that a lot to have conversations about where we want to be as a brand and how we want to show up in international markets.
Who knew we would take over a boat? That was not on my bingo card when we started the whole thing.
Amazing.
Okay, I want to make space for some questions. Anyone? Oh, come on. There's so many
No
questions I have
brave
in my
souls.
head. Don't let me keep stealing the space. Yes?
You mentioned that it's key that fans align with the brands that represent their values. And Laura, you mentioned that too, talking about the Americana as a pitch. How do you all figure that out, establishing that proper match between your brand and the values of the fans?
It's a great, I mean, from our standpoint, it's a great question. I think when we initially made the plan to have rights in a few of those markets, I think we were very clear on, we were able to get the data from the league on who these fans were, but there seemed to be a huge gap between their fandom and them actually participating, whether that was following on social, tuning in, purchasing. And what we found was, at least in Germany, and I think it applies to Mexico too, and to the comment of this pie, we were never going to win if it was simply about trying to pull away from their existing sports fandom, whether that was soccer or basketball. So what we realized very quickly, especially on the Chiefs, was they were connecting with us on something at a little bit of a deeper level, right? It was about this kind of, I realize we're not the underdogs now, so please don't laugh. But at the time when we were starting, it was a bit of this kind of underdog mentality, or a lot of kind of our anthem spots and content that we would put out was about Chiefs Kingdom is wherever you are, so become part of our community. And so, and we honestly, in a lot of the content, we were starting to see our social engagement starting to rise. We were starting to see conversations with partners becoming a bit easier, because it was aligning on who and what we stand for. That has honestly just compounded itself to say, the more that we can get fans to connect with the community of Chiefs Kingdom and how we even differentiate amongst the other NFL teams, some of which that have been in Germany, like the Patriots, for years, right? That was our unique selling point, and honestly works harder for us than anything else that we could possibly activate.
And just one thing to add on values, I think sometimes the things you don't do also
Yep.
show your values.
Yep.
I mean, like we don't need to spend too much time, but like the way you guys handled the Taylor Swift situation,
Yep.
I think speaks to your brand values, right? Like every other brand, maybe in the NFL, would have jumped on that in a way that you guys didn't.
Yep.
And I think sometimes, again, the things you don't do are the most powerful.
Yep. Great question, thanks.
And for Bayern, we are member-owned. So in the Bundesliga, there's this 51+ rule. So that brings out a natural fan-first mentality in everything that we do. There's such a powerful and strong part of who we are as a brand, our culture, etc. So for us, it's just part of our DNA and the way we operate in everything.
We had one over here.
My question was kind of similar, but I wanted to know, we talked a lot about brand, and I think that's really important because you have to maintain that brand identity. You need to be Brooklyn Nets wherever you go. Because if you are just a basketball team going, an American basketball team going to a market, everyone's going to be the same, right? But how much do you really tailor to the market and to the fan base so that your story is received?
Yeah.
So that they appreciate that you're present? Like, how much do you actually do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's the most important question. I think every market is uniquely different. And I'll tell you as a Canadian, like I feel like Canada is very different from the United States, and how brands show up in our market, even within different markets in Canada, it looks completely different. So when we show up in different markets, we do a lot of digging. We do a lot of insight work and social listening and research to understand what we think will work best, and you never really know until you do, right? So we're tinkering right now with potentially taking some of the ideas we executed in one market and trying them in another, but we're trying to use social a little bit to put some tests out in market to see if the market will react the way they did in the prior market.
Anyone else?
There's a lot of people here that are either trying to break into the industry or excel their careers within kind of the sports marketing space. What's one piece of advice you have for people kind of in that sort of realm?
So I'm always the one that no one likes my answer on this one, but as someone who did not come from sport, and I think, as we've been saying, looks at things a bit differently, I think if you're in it already, which is great, to keep excelling, and I think look outside, but certainly people that are not in sport, when I look at my team now and people that we're bringing in, we obviously have great people that were there, but I really look for other industries, oftentimes in marketing and brand, obviously for some of the roles I'm hiring, but also media, agency, I think are super important. And I think it teaches you a totally different skill set than being on the brand or league side.
Completely agree.
As simple as responding to an email, as well as getting random feedback that you have to do something with. So that's my advice of try to get as many experiences versus having that linear thought process.
And network is your currency. You have to build your network, relationships stay front of mind. That's how you're going to really kind of get the next job, the next relationship. That's important.
Totally. Wow. I love it. Thank you for saying that. Again, with the team, I think going back to the culture part, it was really figuring out, and especially with some of our Mexican fans in the documentary, to reference it, there was this whole theme that Mexican fans in general are super passionate, have a ton of emotion, and then we relate that to the Chiefs, that every game is like a nail biter to the end, and that bloated. So we were trying to relate to the core of a Mexican fan, and so when some of those activation ideas came to the picture, it was, again, trying not to just copy and paste. And we've done it in Germany in the past too, Oktoberfest is really important. We've activated, but when we think about new ideas, certainly to reach new fans or in a deeper way, we've tried to go to kind of the heart and soul of who the Mexican fan is and figure out what our way in is. And I would say we probably convert our brand probably a bit more in Mexico than we do in Germany for a variety of reasons that we've had data, but it does seem to be working. So thank you. Yes. There's some fun play on words that go really well. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
To her point, because I'm also Mexican, I was a part of a panel where they described the numbers that you can turn Mexican fans into dollars. Sorry, not Mexican. Latino fans into dollars more so than anything else. And they have all this data to prove that they're very influenceable and will spend money on the things that their teams, players, influencers care about. So I saw another hand. Sure.
Outside of game day experience, how do you measure loyalty
you want to do for your fan clubs? Maybe a good one.
Yeah, I mean, it's the reason why we internationalize, and I think you mentioned it before, what Peter Moore said in terms of 99% of the fan base are actually never going to go to a game. So everything that we do is about how do we make our fans feel close to the club they love. Yes, there's the preseason tours, which is great, and sometimes they get to see them on their home soil, but that's not every year, that's not consistent. So how are we kind of interacting with them? What are we giving them? And one of the first things we set up when we opened the office was the Twitter channel, now X, and Facebook. And basically that brought our fan groups together, and we use it as fan tools to keep everyone connected, share ideas, really bring news to light, and give them a feel of 24-hour local fan services. So that's been really important in making sure they're connected.
And I'll just add one thing that's unique to us. I talked about how competitive New York is, but at the same time, it can also be very lucrative. New York is the #1 tourist destination in the US. It's actually larger than the second and third destinations combined. So we keep talking about 99% of fans won't come in, and I used to say it all the time at the NBA, but uniquely to us, we actually have this opportunity to convert global fans into local tourists, and then local tourists into global fans. And so while we're monetizing fans in markets like Paris through orchestras and pizzerias, we actually are seeing that we're able to monetize fans back in New York, which is a big part of our theory and strategy.
My question kind of got answered, but I just want to say, like, the new generation of marketing and media is interacting with fans, my age, and social media. How is, social media teams, and how do you impact fans like my age and people that are, on Instagram, on TikTok, YouTube Shorts, and stuff like that? How do you get people my age to interact with your teams?
I mean, best question of all time, I think, which is probably what keeps all of us up at night in terms of how do we make sure that we're getting the next generation or this generation. I would just say, I think for us, it has been also a bit of a first mover and a test and learn. So we're the #1 NFL team on TikTok. Huge credit to my social team, who, when I joined, was one person. We've now gotten her a few other people, but they were literally like, we see the opportunity here. We're going to need to have a little bit of fun with the brand, and we're fairly conservative, to be honest, in terms of how our brand comes to life in a lot of things. But it was just constant testing and learning, responding to people on TikTok, trying new things, right? So I do think it's similar in many ways to the internationalization conversation of first mover, test and learn, obviously within guardrails, and then finding partnerships. We talk about that idea of universe colliding. I'm a huge believer in it. I think that's a really big part. Is I say in the best way of like trying to steal someone else's cool a little bit. I think can go a really long way, and we're willing, I think, to extend our brand to do that.
Beautiful. Do we have time for one more? Yeah, go ahead. Oh, Laura.
It's a great question. Look, it's a very important variable and factor, right? It's the reality of the world that we live in. And so naturally, as we think about activating in global markets and bringing our brand to life, like it's certainly a variable that we have to consider every single time we build campaigns.
And I think for Bayern, we always say that we are soccer is about bringing people together. So in times of despair, COVID, for example, when COVID happened, we were the first league that was back to playing, and it was important for us as a club to make sure we performed and did our best because we needed to give people joy, and that's just the spirit of how we operate. Sport has a really big role to play in that.
Okay, Laura, I don't want you to miss your flight. So please go. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.